Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to break down my cover of Purple Rain by Prince. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so here we have the session, and with this cover I want to stay as true to the original as possible, so I kind of went with the same sounds. So let's just start at the top here with the drums. So Prince used a drum machine called Lindqvist on the original track, and what I did here was program the drums using the Superior Drummer 3, and then later I replaced the kick, snare and toms with samples from the Lindqvist. I used samples from a company called Samples from Mars. They make really high quality samples from these old drum machines from the 80s and 90s. So I used battery for my sampler, and the cymbals are just from the Superior Drummer. And I think that's how they did the drums on the original as well. So all the shells from the drum machine and then real cymbals from a drum kit. So here's how the drum sounds. Here's the kick. And here's the EQ, cutting some mids and highs, and a little bit of compression. And then I'm sending that to a get it reverb and a little bit of hall. And then we have the snare. Adding a ton of high end and cutting some high mids. And a little bit of compression. And I'm also sending that to a get it reverb and a hall reverb. Here's dry. So it's really dry straight from the drum machine, but then when you add the reverbs, then we're in the 80s again. And then the toms. Again, adding some highs, cutting some high mids, and also some mids here. And these I'm also sending to the same reverbs, just so that they are in the same space. And then here we have the cymbals from Superior Drummer, just the overhead mics and the room mics. Just the hi-hat and the crashes. And that's basically the drums. All these drums go to a drum bus, which have the decapitator, a little bit of saturation, and a little bit of clipping, and then a bit of tape simulation here at the end. So the drums again. So pretty straightforward there. Then let's move on to the bass. I play the bass with my Squire PJ bass. Here's how that sounds. And I recorded the bass straight into my audio interface. And then I use this Ampeg SVT amp sim from Bogren Digital. A little bit of EQ, cutting some low mids and the high passing at 70 Hertz. And a little bit of compression. And then the same tape plug-in at the end. I'm also sending that to a tiny bit of room reverb, just so that it's not too dry. And then we have this CP80 electric piano track here. It sounds like this. And this is the Arturia version. And here's the EQ. High pass at 80, a tiny bit of 90 Hertz, and then cutting at 4K and adding a bit of 8K here. Then I'm also adding a bit of chorus. Here's without. With. So it makes it much more wider. And then again, the same tape plugin. And then I'm sending that to a room reverb, as well as a hall reverb, and also a doubler. And then we have the Oberheim synth. This is also from Arturio's collection. It sounds like this. And here's the EQ, adding quite a bit of high end here, and cutting a tiny bit of 200, and high passing at 90, 95. Then the same chorus plugin, just to make it wider. Here's without. With. And then the tape plugin. And here I'm only sending it to the whole reverb, as well as a doubler. And I believe that Prince used, I read somewhere that he used the CP80 and Oberheim on this track as well. And then we have the strings here. Sounds like this. And these I just arranged by ear. I'm by no means a string arranger, but I try to get as close as possible with these different string instruments. So we have a violin, and then viola, a couple of tracks of violas, and then a couple of tracks of cellos. And I'm using the Spitfire chamber strings, which is kind of a smaller ensemble compared to a big symphony orchestra. It's quite a different sound. And here I'm just boosting highs on pretty much all these. No, not there. But on pretty much all strings, just to make them cut through a little bit better. And all these go to this string bus here, where I have this same tape plugin, and then I'm sending all the strings to a room reverb, as well as the hall. So so far we have this. And then the most important part, the guitar. So the original guitar parts was played by a guitar player called Wendy Melvoin, who played with Prince in the 80s. And here's actually a clip with her on the Vertex FX channel, where she explains what she used on the original track.
Originally on Purple Rain, what chorus was that?
I just used just the original chorus.
The Boss CE1?
The Boss CE1, yeah.
And what was the amps that you were into for that?
I was using Mesa Boogie and JBLs.
Oh, like, so is it a Mark 1?
Yeah, it was a Mark 1.
Okay, Mesa Boogie Mark 1,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. And that was just in mono, or was that in stereo?
That was mono.
It was all mono?
All mono, baby.
Wow. I think everybody,
Old
it
school.
sounds so
Old
huge,
school.
you know?
Yeah, I know, but
everybody
you know.
assumes it's the same.
And I was using this great, I had a Rickenbacker that was totally transformed. It had G&L pickups in it, and it was, all the holes were closed, and, you know, I mean, it was blaspheme. But anyway, I had two of them, and I used those guitars for all of the Purple Rain stuff.
All right, so what I used here, I used my Telecaster on the middle pickup, as I don't have the Rickenbacker. But with my Fractal, I used the Mesa Boogie Mark II amp with a Mesa cab, just to get as close as possible. And then, of course, this chorus. This is actually a plugin from Audiority. Sounds really great. So again, here's how my guitar sounds. Without. So that's basically the sound. It really falls apart without this chorus. All right, so let's move on. Then we have the EQ. Adding quite a bit of 100 Hertz, high passing at 100. And then some compression. About 3 dB. And then a limiter just to tame the peaks. And I'm sending that also to the Hall reverb, as well as the doubler. And this is pretty much the same. Same guitar, same settings. It's just a in the chorus here. And here we have the distorted guitar. And here I used the same amp, the Mesa. And then I just added a Boss DS1 distortion pedal before the amp. As Prince was also a big fan of Boss pedals, so I believe he used that one as well on this track. And all these 3 guitar tracks goes to this guitar bus, where I have this EQ just taming some harsh frequencies here. And then I use this UAD Sound City Studios reverb plugin, as they felt a little bit too dry, the guitars. But this acts a little bit different than a usual reverb plugin. This is actually the Sound City room, the real studio. So as you can basically see here, these tracks are being fed out from these virtual speakers, and then these mics pick up the sound in this room. So it's like my guitar was played in this room. So that's another cool way to add some ambience to the guitars in a more natural way than compared to a reverb plugin. But I also used the Hall reverb. And then the same tape plugin at the end. So with everything else, so then lastly we have the lead guitar. Here I just used my usual lead tone, which is a JCM 800 from the Fractal, and then this same chorus plugin. And here's the EQ, cutting some low mids, adding a tiny bit of highs, and the limiter just to tame the peaks. Without the chorus. With. And that I'm sending to the same hall reverb, and then the doubler, as well as a dual delay, which we'll have a look at in just a second. So this is basically the melody track here, and then on the second track I have the solo. I believe I added a little bit more gain in the Fractal for the solo. Otherwise it's just the same settings with the chorus and EQ and the reverbs. And these two I'm also sending it to a lead bus here with the same EQ here. And here we have the same Sound City plugin and then the tape. All right, so here we have all the tracks together from the solo. And here we have the effects that I used for this song. First we have the doubler from Sound Toys, the micro shift, which I use for the synths and some of the guitars. Here's the gated reverb for the drums. And here's the room reverb, just a 1 second decay here. And then we have the hall reverb, which is based on a EMT 250. And here's the dual delay, which I used for the solo. So there's 800 milliseconds on the right side and 400 milliseconds on the left side. And that kind of creates this stereo feel. And these are just VCAs for the different groups here, just for some volume control. And then lastly, we have this master bus here. So all the tracks goes to this SSL bus compressor. Doing about 2-3 dB of gain reduction. Then we have this Pultec EQ, adding a little bit of lows and highs. And then this black box for some saturation. And again, the tape on the whole master. And this is the BX refinement, just controlling a bit of the harshness. And then at the end, the Ozone mastering plugin, tiny bit of high end, and a dynamic EQ, and then the last limiter here. And this is just for my monitoring here. All right, so there you have it. This was my cover of Purple Rain by Prince. I hope you enjoyed the video, and make sure to watch the cover that I released a couple of weeks ago. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Hej då!